We are focusing on tomorrow afternoon's All-Ireland football semi-final. It is Kerry against Tyrone 2 weeks later than advertised, and delighted to welcome Kerry footballer Louise Galvin to the show to preview. Louise, how are you getting on?
Good on, not too bad now.
So this Tyrone team, if we forget all the COVID issues for just a moment, are trending upwards, I think it's fair to say. New management, a young team, and are a really exciting team, if not for now, then at least for the future. Kerry have beaten them in 2015, have beaten them in 2019. So for the sake of this rivalry, from Kerry's perspective, how important is it that they keep winning in this rivalry and keep getting one over the opposition? Because we know from the 2000s just how important that momentum can be in a Kerry-Tyrone rivalry.
Yeah, I suppose it is massively important, but it is secondary to Kerry's ultimate goal, which is get to the All-Ireland final, and it's just Tyrone that they're facing. But there is a lot of, I suppose any time two teams play that have a bit of a history, you're going back towards the noughties. But in truth, I mean, this is Brian Dewar on one sideline, but we don't have an awful lot of, I suppose, players that were directly involved in that rivalry in the noughties. So I don't think it matters as much. And the style of football that Tyrone brought back then certainly was effective, and it worked for them, and it changed football for a number of years. But I think we've come away from that now, so it's probably not as relevant as people make out. It's just nice to maybe fill the column inches in the run up to the game. I think what's more pertinent for Kerry is that they've had their most recent wins in a lot of tight semi-finals, and that it's gotten them into the final. So they'll be looking to keep that going with the semi-final as well, but purely on the basis because they want to win an All-Ireland. And I think just keeping that rivalry up and maybe that little bit of dominance in championship football over Tyrone is an added bonus, really.
Who's made the bigger strides forward from Kerry and Tyrone's perspective since 2019?
Oh, well, I guess we've had such a blip in 2020. We were just caught so cold against Cork that you can't say that, reaching an All-Ireland final, going to a replay, again, we should have won day one, and then going out in a Munster semi-final was a really progression from 2019. But certainly this year, you can't be impressed by the way Kerry have gone around their business. Obviously, we didn't have a league final, but had a very good league. And then haven't had a huge amount of competition. Would have been disappointed with what Cork showed up with in the Munster final. But we've done what we've needed to do, racked up an awful lot of scores. As always, there's always a little bit of question marks over Kerry's full backline, but I think that's more, rather than the man-to-man markers that we have there, I think that's a little bit of the style of play that not only Kerry but Gaelic football has gone, and that has gone into a bit of a shootout again. And when you have such an attacking half backline and you've midfielders that can get forward and score, and cornerbacks, like, look, we've Thomas Sullivan, Brino Big League shipping in to score as well. Tyke Morley came on and got a point in even that Munster final when he would have been coming up from the full back line. So when you have that kind of style of play, you'll always have those question marks about your full back line because you're not stacking the numbers back there. And inter-county football, you're always going to have those incredible inside forwards that if you leave them 1-on-1, they're going to score. You're just hoping you're going to outshoot them at the other end. That's the way football's gone, and that's the way Kerry's are playing as well.
It's a really interesting point, and it brings us nicely on to the comments from Gavin Devlin over the last couple of days. I'm sure you've seen these. He's done a piece. I'll credit now in just a moment. I seem to have just lost it here. He has said that there is a reason why Kerry come out and play in the middle of the field with 15 men behind a ball, because they don't trust the men at the back. Team Talk Mag, is who he was speaking to. The quotes are referred to in the Examiner this morning. So it looks like he's looking at things from a different perspective to you there, that it's about a lack of trust that Kerry have for their defenders, and that is why they play the way they do.
I agree with him that if you get the Kerry full back line on one-on-one situations or a lot of space, and Cork did it at the beginning of the Munster final, and you run at them hard. And Sean Powder, I think, was on with yourselves earlier in the week, and he mentioned even the Munster semi-final last year that's how they targeted Kerry, was to run at them hard. That's no big secret. But I think, again, it's because Kerry have looked at the players that they have, they've looked at the style of play and said, right, we're still going to work hard. We're going to try and block teams up from number 15 back, but we're always going to try and outscore teams, and we're always going to give our half back line a license to attack, because they add a lot of pace to our attack, and they add a lot of players coming in, making a run flushing out weak side, creating maybe a little pocket of space that then a David Clifford or a Paul Ganey can pop into. So I think it more is the style of play that we've gone and decided to play with. And yeah, obviously then when we concede the ball, whether it be up front, whether we leave a short kick out, we're obviously going to defend with 15 players. I mean, that's Gaelic football now. Your 6 forwards don't just switch off, or your inside line don't just switch off. I mean, look at the incredible tackling that Mayo did against Dublin. That was so important to them turning Dublin over. I mean, we all have that clip of Davy Byrne soloing over the end line. I mean, that's incredible at that stage of the game. So, I don't think it's necessarily we're doing that because we really don't trust our full back line. I think it's a bit of a product of the whole system that we're playing.
Absolutely. And the other thing, just to go through some of these here, is about what Kerry are going to do in terms of matchups and what Tyrone are going to do in matchups. Just to stick with some of these Gavin Devlin quotes. The headline, by the way, is Devlin wants Tyrone to expose Kerry for what they really are. So he's thinking putting Rory Brennan and Paudie Clifford. He hasn't played a lot of football this season, but he's a serious defender. Then we have Padraig Hampsey and Ronan McNamee, and you can take your pick with Paul Ganey and David Clifford. Either one for me. I'd put Petey Hart on Sean O'Shea and bring Conor Myler back on Stephen O'Brien. I think we win all those battles. I think we win them all. So David Clifford, Sean O'Shea and co are all going to get beaten by their men on the day tomorrow, is what Gavin Devlin reckons. Gavin Devlin, by the way, the former Tyrone coach who worked with Mickey Hart. What do you reckon, Louise? Is he right?
Again, I think if Sean O'Shea sees Peter Hart coming towards him, he's going to bring him into the full back line where he's not used to playing and where you're taking away some of Peter Hart's strengths, where he wants to bomb forward a little bit as well. So that is one thing about this Kerry forward line, is because you have a Paul Ganey who's lining out maybe a half forward line, can drift into the full forward line. Likewise, Sean O'Shea played an awful lot of most of his football, intercounty football, up into this year in the half forward line. Now he's playing a lot more inside. So I think if Kerry, depending on their matchups, they'll look to expose the weakness. And, Tyrone don't have players that necessarily are as comfortable in the full back line, half back line. So I think depending on who picks them up, they might switch it around a little bit. And again, look, a lot can be made about matchups at the beginning of the game, and you'll always have one or two that you'll probably stick, like where this is, McCurry, McCann or whoever sticking to David Clifford. But you can't have 6 backs or 5 backs consistently sticking to one player, because the movement it's too much. And I think, again, Sean Powder in his clip with yourselves earlier in the week alluded to this, like you have to be prepared to mark a few different players. Sometimes a lot can be made of matchups earlier in the game. I also don't think Tyrone are going to leave themselves, or they're going to aim to not leave themselves one-on-one in a lot of situations. I think they're actually going to, even though they're quite attacking earlier on in the Ulster Championship, I think as it's progressed, they've become a little bit more defend en masse and break out en masse. And I think that's going to be their goal against Kerry, is to try and block up the defence, not leave these guys in one-on-one, because, it's only going to be one outcome. And then use their pace and their fitness and their attacking use to try and get up that field as quickly as possible. Get ball in early to the likes of McCurry and Maddie Donnelly, and try and expose them against potentially a Kerry full back line that might be a little bit isolated if we have a Gavin White and a Paul Murphy or whoever who decide to bomb up the field.
So you're seeing basically 13 men behind the ball for Tyrone as their default from the start of the position, with the 2 up front. And as you rightly say, it'll definitely then be one-on-one in both of those positions, because Kerry will follow all 13 men, but they'll obviously stay with the 2 left up front, which, if Tyrone gets a turnovers, will obviously be a lethal tactic for them. The question is, are Kerry susceptible to giving up the turnover when they're attacking?
Look, they're generally very good at ball in hand, but again, there's so much unknown, because both teams are coming in. Like, Kerry haven't played in 5 weeks, Tyrone obviously 4 weeks, and there's a lot that we don't know about how Tyrone are going to turn up, how they're going to play, who's been affected by this COVID outbreak. There's a lot more known about this game than we often have going into an All-Ireland semi-final. I think one positive for Kerry with that long break is Diarmuid O'Connor picked up that injury early in the Munster final. We're hoping he's okay. Peter Keane has reported a clean bill of health, and obviously Darren Moynihan, who's been doing very well. He's hopefully back in contention as well. So in the Munster final, they started Jack Barry at wing forward, and I know he probably would have been pressing for Diarmuid O'Connor's position, but now there's a lot more to play for. for Peter Keane, there's a lot more for him to select between. Jack Barry did relatively well. Jim O'Connor, how fit is he? Versus a Darren Moynihan and Michael Burns coming in as well. So Kerry probably have all their aces back in the pack as well. I don't think we're going to get caught cold because I think it happened last year, and I don't think it can happen again another year. I think what Kerry do have to do though, they've got to back their legs, because even if Tyrone come out all guns blazing, they have to back that if whatever 17 of these players are affected, even if they're mildly affected, even the fact that they weren't able to train, Kerry have to push them from 55 minutes on to see, do they have the legs for championship pace, for championship intensity? And it's probably not something that's, again, playing with incredible intensity at the end of the game. Kerry like to control the game, they like to use their football, but I think we have to be prepared to absolutely push. And, we don't have too many men the wrong side of 30. So I think we really have to back our legs. And if this is a tight game, which absolutely could be, 1-2 points in it coming up to 60 minutes, I think Kerry have to raise the intensity levels, and they have to take that knowledge, much like if you're playing someone and they're just back after a big knee injury, you take them on. I think they have to trust that their legs are going to be stronger than Tyrone's purely on the basis of, well, they've had COVID through the camp, and even if it's mildly affected them, it still would have affected, at the very least, their ability to train in the last few weeks, if it hasn't affected their actual cardiovascular fitness from a medicinal point of view.
Does your cardio dip a little bit without a game in 5 weeks? I know the in-house games with the panel Kerry have are extremely strong, no doubt about it, but without a competitive fixture, do you dip a little bit after 5 weeks off?
Your cardio won't dip, because again, your strength conditioning, you've planned for this, although obviously they would have planned for 3 weeks initially, and then a little bit of a juggling of balls in the middle. But it's more the sharpness, I think, and the more mental side of it. But again, because we've had that game last year, that getting beaten by Cork, I don't think that's going to be an issue. But no, that would be, with GPS, with heart rate monitoring and everything, and these guys are so finely tuned that, it's not like they need to put a whole lot of hard yards. The bank, it's more just about, monitoring load, trying to peak and then just deload to a certain amount this week so that they're ready to go at the weekend. So it's more the foreplanning. It's not going to be fitness. It's more about, I suppose, that element of sharpness. And again, when your players back in the mix, trying to decide who is your best 15 to start the game.
Kieran Whelan was down in Kerry last week. He was in Listowel. He said when chatting to the locals, their main concern was reflecting on whether winning the All-Ireland and not beating Dublin in the process would be classified as a genuine All-Ireland success. Whoever he was talking to are not playing the Era game very well, Louise.
No, they're not. I said this to some non-Kerry people in the week. I said, there's Kerry people disappointed Mayo won, not because Mayo won, but because there was that sense of, but we have to beat Dublin.
Yeah.
And look, that's there. Any Kerry person who tells you that they weren't thinking that are a true football fan, well,
they're a liar.
They're playing a bit of the Era game. Yeah. And you can be damn sure if we go on and win an All-Ireland, which would be absolutely fantastic, we beat Tyrone, beat Mayo, you come back on here and say, lads, but you didn't beat Dublin. It will be thrown back in the face, and you have to beat Dublin now next year to be truly considered, a good team or better than Dublin. So, but listen, that's outside of our control, and fair play to Mayo. We have to do what we need to do now and make sure we're not caught hop against what's like. Tyrone love their backs to the wall. They love all this kind of, the GA wanted to throw us out of the championship. They'll be playing that up gung-ho. They'll be, listen, this is not going to be any sort of semblance of a walkover. The league game in Clarny is completely irrelevant. This is going to be some battle tomorrow. They're going to be trying to get stuck in as much as possible. And even, the likes of Gavin Devlin coming out with comments like that, they're already trying to scratch underneath the surface. And then you have the likes of Peter Callum kind of saying, we'd be looking to be a few points behind because obviously COVID and that. And you're like, lads, you've no intention of being a few points behind. You're coming up here to win, building nicely. Again, when you look back at the Ulster Championship, obviously beating Donegal is a big scalp, but there's a lot that went against Donegal that day that, if Neil McGee hadn't gone off, Michael Murphy, missing a penalty, black card, yellow card before half time. Could have, Donegal could have had another penalty claim not long after the missed penalty. So I mean, fair enough, they went on, they won that game by 6 points, but it was a bit of hair and scarum for them as well, and they've pushed on against Monaghan. And that's a dangerous team, a team that are winning closely and building with each game and starting to create a lot of belief within their own system. So who knows? But I think we have to, if we're going to go with form, what little form we have, and the knowledge that, you know, Tyrone have had their training, I suppose, interrupted for whatever, you know, players out injured or out with COVID, then we have to hope that Kerry are going to, not hope, but I hope that Kerry are going to come out the right side at the end of the day tomorrow.
Yeah, and you say that Tyrone are using all these different factors as private motivation. I think it's pretty public at this stage that they've been using it, and I think it's not only just the way they've been written off, and in fairness to them, they are the one crowd who can say we have been written off, because they have been written off by so many people. I think that's changed as the week has gone on, but I also think they've used that league results as some sort of motivation, that they've used that to put a layer on top of this about being written off. And Conor McKeown in the paper this morning makes a really good point, that like you can actually look at games after that to see if the Kerry side of things that day in Killarney against Tyrone stood up. And you look at Kerry's Munster Championship, and it does stand up. Their most recent game, they were absolutely outstanding. So it's not like as if Kerry-Tyrone was the last game Kerry played. We do have one half of that rivalry going toe-to-toe tomorrow that have shown us form that is becoming of that day when they scored 6 goals that afternoon. So I wonder, are we playing down the chances or the relevance of that game a little bit too much?
I suppose from a Kerry point of view, you want to play down because you don't want to go in thinking you're a 16-point better team. And from a Tyrone point of view, you want it to be irrelevant because you don't want to think it's a 16-point worse team, you know. So I think what's, you know, there could be an element of Kerry showing their hand in that game and Tyrone saying, well, they can't get any better than that, lads, but we've gotten a lot better. I think Kerry have been rattling in the goals this year in the league and championship. And that'll be a huge, huge focus for Tyrone, is to not let Kerry get goals, because it's like oxygen to the team. So I think even if they're, you know, giving up and they're racking up the points, I think this Kerry team, they're kind of living off, not that they're living off goals, but you can see there's a change when they score. Not that it's worth more than the 3 points on the scoreboard. If I'm trying to make some sense of this. So I think Tyrone will have an absolute focus on not conceding goals, which might be an obvious statement, but more because of the scoreboard, more than the scoreboard, more what it kind of means to Kerry and that kind of boost that it gives them, because there's certainly previous Kerry teams are kind of happy to take their points and keep the scoreboard ticking over, but there's something a bit more ruthless about, and it's not just the David Cliffords and the Shawnee Shades, it's you know, we've Gavin White, we've the backs coming forward going, yeah, I want to get on the end of a goal, like. So there's definitely been a shift in mindset that they're a bit more goal focused this year, and they're rattling them in. So I think that's going to be a huge focus for Tyrone. For
sure, absolutely. I get the sense from what you're saying that you're not confident that this is going to be a healthy win by any stretch of the imagination, but you're confident enough to predict Kerry.
Confident enough to predict Kerry, because I think, you know, similar to the 2019 semi-final, if we're struggling, we have a few game changers to come off the field, come off the bench. So again, the likes of a Tommy Walsh, who can change. He's a different type of player. He's great at winning ball and bringing other players into the team, into the game. Killian Spillane as well. Anytime he's come on, he's, you know, kicking over 3 or 4 points from play. So I think along with our bench, if things aren't going to plan, we have some changes. I'm not sure if a Dara Moynihan starts. Does that mean, you know, Steve or someone doesn't? And again, that's another all-star that you're bringing off the bench. So I do think we've enough to make changes both up front and defensively in the midfield as well. So I think we have it. Yeah, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be a big win, no.
Louise, just before we let you go, we haven't been chatting to you for a while. Obviously, you were back in the green and gold yourself this summer. What was it like being back, and how did you enjoy the league and championship?
Yeah, it was class being back, to be honest. Really, really enjoyed it. I suppose it's been about 6 years since I played inter-county football. And yeah, like, it was great to see the setup that we have down in Kerry. Darrell and Declan Quill, joint managers, were, you know, they've done a great job, and to see the depth of talent within the squad that have come up through underage. Had it difficult, I suppose. We got the Division 2 final and maybe unfortunately beat Meath in an away league game that opened up the campaign, and thought we weren't great that day. But actually, when we played in the league final again up in Croke Park to get promotion, they well turned us over, and they've just gone from strength to strength since then. And obviously they're playing in All-Ireland final next weekend against Dublin. probably then had 2 tight losses against certainly Galway was a 1-point loss, and Donegal in our championship group that ended up meaning we had to play a relegation semi-final against Tip, which thankfully we won well. But like certainly what I can see in ladies football since I've last played is like the pace of the game, the fitness has come up so much, and the skill level. And I just think we need to move with the game a little bit in terms of certainly what biggest frustration for me this season was. You're not even asking me this, but I'm ready to give my spiel anyway. It's like the inconsistent application of the rules. Like you'd certainly, because we're playing in Division 2, at times we've refs who want very little contact. Girls they're fit, they're strong, they're fast, they're prepared for contact, and at times just I think the rules, first of all, they can be inconsistently applied. So I think you can play another game and the refs can play it completely differently, and you're like, oh, this is great, we can actually play a bit of contact. That I just think it needs to be looked at, because, and I think it's, a lot of the camogie players are saying the same. We're doing all this gym work, we're doing all this conditioning, and yet the game is kind of not really caught up with the level that the players are at. So I think that's something that does need to be looked at. But overall, just hugely impressed with the standard nationwide. And Dublin, again, we didn't play them this year, but they're the standard setters, they're the goal setters. But there's a lot of teams that are coming around a similar level behind them, and I'm hoping Kerry are going to be one of those in the next few years as well.
Just because Mick Bowen was saying the exact same thing recently about the application of the rules. Like, so you're saying that in Division 2, basically, that the rules are not the rules being applied, but the referees are more whistle happy in that division than they are at the top level.
Yeah, I found that, and I found when we then went to play in our championship group game, certainly in that game against Galway, we were bitching and moaning at the ref because we were getting soft frees in Division 2. But actually, when I look back, that's the ref, the way he played it against Galway, against Donegal, was the way I'd like to play the game. It's the way we'd like to play the game. But we got used to, refs telling us at the start of the game, no contact. And the only way you can just dispossess the bear is if you can intercept her without touching her as she's hopping soloing. So, and that wasn't every game. Certainly the games against Meath were probably a bit more physical because, again, we were probably two bigger. We were probably the top teams in the division. But yeah, definitely when you came up to senior level, it was a bit more allowed. But again, there's times like in that Dublin Donegal semi-final or quarter-final, where I think Mick Bowen made the comments afterwards. I agree to them absolutely that day, like there was such non-fouls, giving us fouls. And again, that's become really fast and free-flowing, has become whistle-happy then. And players, you don't know to. And the thing about ladies football is yellow card is 10 minutes of the bin. It's more than, so if you pick up 2 or 3 tickings and you get a yellow card and a lot of the times barging seems to have come in massively, where they feel that the attacking players who's just trying to run hard and strong is they're given away. And even if they're trying to turn out of the contact, but if the defender can kind of plant and fall to the ground, it seems to be a lot of barging called this year. So certainly needs to be looked at, because I think the game is progressing so much that if you keep the rules at a very kind of a stagnant, this like non-contact level, then it's going to become a whistle-happy game, and it's going to become less easier to market and not as nice to watch or play.
Yeah, absolutely. Louise, great chatting to you as ever. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
Will do, hopefully.
Cheers. Louise Galvin.
Thanks,
there on the line, Kerry footballer and former Ireland international with rugby as well. Right, at 13 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning, we've got a packed show still to come